Good morning, everybody. So today's assembly is all about empathy because it's Empathy Day. Empathy is our ability to understand people better, and it can be a force for change because it can make us want to help people. It also links with so many of our Soho Parish values: love, community, and imagination. So if we understand people better and understand how they feel, we can work as more of an effective community with love and care at the heart of everything that we do. Imagination is really important as well because it helps us to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes to understand their perspective and how they feel. On the empathylab.uk website, there's loads of resources and activities you can do around Empathy Day. There's also lots of stories that you can listen to, and stories are a really great way of developing our imagination. So when we listen to a story, we become really absorbed in it, we get really interested in the characters, and our brain actually reacts to what's happening in the story just as it would to real events. So it's a really good way to train our brain to develop more empathy through understanding those characters a little bit better. So I'm going to read you a story today, and in this story I think one of the characters shows quite a lot of empathy for another character. So as I'm reading the story, see if you can spot this happening.
Dogger by Shirley Hughes.
Once there was a soft brown toy called Dogger. One of his ears pointed upwards and the other flopped over. His fur was worn in places because he was quite old. He belonged to Dave. Dave was very fond of Dogger. He took him everywhere. Sometimes he gave him rides in a trolley. Sometimes he pulled him along on a lead made of string like a real dog. When it was cold, he wrapped him up in a bit of a blanket. Now and again, Dave's mum said that Dogger was getting much too dirty. She showed Dave how to wash him in a bowl of soapy water. Then they hung him up by his tail on the washing line to dry. Dave's baby brother Joe liked hard toys. He liked putting them in his mouth and biting on them because he was getting teeth. Dave's big sister Bella took 7 teddies to bed with her every night. She had to sleep right up against the wall to stop herself from falling out. But Dave liked only Dogger. One afternoon, Dave and Mum set out to collect Bella from school. Mum took Joe in the pushchair and Dave took Dogger. Next to the school gate where the mums waited was a playing field. Some men with ladders were putting up coloured flags. Mum said that there was going to be a summer fair to get money to buy things for the school. Dave pushed Dogger up against the railings to show him what was going on. Just then, the children started to come out of school. An ice cream van came round the corner playing a tune. Bella ran up with her satchel flying. "Mum, can we have an ice cream?" Mum gave her the money for 2 cones. Joe didn't have a whole ice cream to himself because he was too dribbly. On the way home, Dave walked beside the pushchair, giving Joe licks of his ice cream. Joe kicked his feet about and shouted for more in between the licks. At tea time, Dave was rather quiet. In the bath, he was even quieter. At bedtime, he said, "I want Dogger." But Dogger was nowhere to be found. Mum looked under the bed. She looked behind the cupboard. She searched in the kitchen. And underneath the stairs. Dave watched anxiously through the banisters. Joe watched through the bars of his cot. Bella joined in to look for Dogger. She turned out her own toy box in case he was in there, but he wasn't. When Dad came home, he looked for Dogger too. He searched in the shed and down the garden path with a torch, but Dogger was quite lost. Dave was very sad when he went to bed. Bella kindly lent him one of her teddies to go to sleep with, but it was not the same thing as Dogger. Dave kept waking up in the night and missing him. The next day was Saturday, and they all went to the school. It was the summer fair. The playing field was full of stalls and sideshows. There was a fancy dress parade. Then there were sports with an egg and spoon race, a wheelbarrow race, and a father's race. Bella was very good at races. She won the three-legged race with her friend Barbara. "Wouldn't you like to go in for a race?" they asked Dave. Dave didn't feel like racing. He was missing Dogger too much. Then another very exciting thing happened to Bella. She won first prize in a raffle. It was a huge yellow teddy bear wearing a beautiful blue silk bow. He was almost as big as Dave. Dave didn't like that teddy at all. At that moment, he didn't like Bella. He didn't like her much because she kept on winning things. He went off on his own to look at the stalls. One lady had a toy stall full of knitted ducks and cars and baby dolls in bonnets. And there, at the very back of the stall, behind a lot of other toys, was... It was Dogger. He was wearing a ticket saying 5p. There were a lot of people round the stall. They tried to explain to the lady that it was his Dogger, who had got lost and somehow been put on the stall by mistake. But he wasn't listening. He looked in his pocket. He had 3p. That wasn't enough. He ran to find Mum and Dad to ask them to buy Dogger back at once. Dave went everywhere in the crowd, but he couldn't see Mum and Dad. He thought he was going to cry. At last he found Bella by the cakes. When she heard about Dogger, she and Dave ran back to the toy stall as fast as they could. But something terrible had happened. Dogger had just been bought by a little girl. She was already walking off with him. Dave began to cry. Bella ran after her and tried to explain that Dogger really belonged to Dave, and could they please buy him back? But the little girl said no. She said that she had bought Dogger with her own money and she wanted him. She held on to him very tightly. Dave cried and cried and cried. The little girl started to cry too. But out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of Bella's big yellow teddy. She stopped crying and put out her hand to stroke his beautiful blue silk bow. Then Bella did something very kind. "Would you swap this teddy for my brother's dog then?" she asked. Right away the little girl stopped crying and began to smile. She held out Dogger to Dave, took the big teddy instead and went off with him in her arms. Then Dave smiled too. He hugged Dogger and he hugged Bella round the waist. "Thank you, Bella," he said. That night, Dave had Dogger in bed beside him. Bella was practicing somersaults. "Don't you miss that big teddy?" Dave asked her. "No," said Bella. "I didn't like him much, really. He was too big and his eyes were too starey." Anyway, if I had another teddy in my bed, there wouldn't be room for me. So, in this story, did you notice which character had empathy for another character? Give you a chance to have a little think. So I thought that Bella showed real empathy for Dave. So he was her brother, and she could understand how he felt when he lost his favourite toy. And she really tried to help him because she could understand how he felt. First of all, she helped him to look everywhere for his favourite toy, but that didn't work. And then she did something really, really kind. She sacrificed something that was important to her. She'd won a prize, hadn't she? She'd won a big teddy. But yet, she could see how much Dogger meant to her little brother, to Dave. And she sacrificed that. She gave up something that probably did mean something to her, even though at the end she said she didn't mind. She swapped it. She did something kind and thoughtful and helpful because she could understand all of the emotion that Dave was feeling, and she wanted to be able to help. So I think that story is a really good example of how when we put ourselves in other people's shoes, we can show empathy.
Barack Obama once said, "Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world." So empathy is a powerful tool for change. And there's lots of people experiencing challenges and difficulties in the world right now. And so to be able to try and understand how others feel is really important. Read. To help, we can start by reading books or listening to stories, which will help develop our imagination and empathy for different characters. Visit empathylab.uk to listen to lots of empathy-themed stories. Connect. Practice your listening skills using the listening switch exercise suggested by Empathy Lab. To try the listening switch exercise, sit down with someone you know and ask them to tell you about something that happened recently that made them feel an emotion. As they tell you their story, imagine turning on the empathy switch and listen with empathy. Give them your full attention. When they finish, check that you've understood them by saying, "So you felt because..." Then swap round and get them to listen to you in the same way and ask the same question. When everyone has finished, discuss how it felt to be listened to. Did you both understand each other's feelings? In your home learning Google Drive for this week, your teacher will have put some family activities linked to Empathy Day and also a copy of the Empathy Switch and these empathy listening vouchers. The vouchers can be handed out amongst your family and can be used when someone really needs to be listened to. Put your empathy into action. Make an empathy resolution. Why don't you make a poster to show what your empathy resolution will be and display it in your window for all to see? We must be the change we want to see in the world. If we want to see more understanding, tolerance and empathy, then we need to develop that more within ourselves too. So what will this look like? Here are some ideas of things you could do. Commit to listening more to your siblings. Decide to not interrupt others when they are speaking. Ask more questions to find out how your friends are. Challenge yourself more to see others' points of view. Find out more about people in society whose voices aren't heard and see what is being done to support them. Find out what your neighbours need or help a local food bank. Whatever you do, every little helps us to develop our empathy superpower.
So let's have a moment of reflection to end our assembly today. And we'll light the candle and we can just take a pause and maybe we can bring to mind some of those people around the world who might face challenges and difficulties, who might suffer in silence and not have their voices heard. We can also set an intention to develop and grow the empathy inside ourselves so that we can connect with others and understand them better. So I'll just light the candle. So we'll just spend a few moments looking at the candle and having that reflection. So happy Empathy Day, everyone. I hope you enjoy listening to some of those stories and taking part in some of those activities. And if in doubt, then visit the empathylab.uk website for lots of top tips and ideas of things to do.